All right, Lane, we'll be now teaching you how to build a very basic iPhone application interaction. So it will involve putting basic elements onto the user interface and allowing the user of the iPhone application to interact with that app. So let's just get started. So we start up Xcode and we create a new project. I used a shortcut there. Um, but this application is going to be a single view application, and we'll just call it simple teaching app. It's going to be iPhone. We'll take away storyboards for now. Here we are. Now, the first thing we see here is that there's an app delegate file within the project. There's implementation for that app delegate. There's a view controller, implementation for that view controller, and then sorry about that. Here's the screen. The implementation file for the view controller, and then the nib or zib file. That's where the user interface elements will be dragged onto the screen. And in this application, we'll just run it right out of the box. Build successful. It's launching the simulator. Make sure you have iPhone simulator set as the active scheme. There. And then this is our empty starting point application. Now, it might have been set to device or iPad, but choose the iPhone. So now let's start to drag on some user interface elements. So this screen on the simulator is the same as what's going on here on this nib file. So we can pull up our objects library. So that's this icon right here. And we'll just go ahead and put a little label here. Call that student. And then we'll have a text field. Use those guiding blue lines to help us with our placement. This is a text field where we're going to input a student's name. And we'll also have a label which will be a place where we're going to put some output text. Just roll that up a little bit. And then a button. So drag on the button. We'll put that right in the middle. Now with this label, what I'd like to do is modify it slightly. Well, we'll put it at system bold, say, and then we'll get rid of the text on it. And let's change the lines to 0. That will allow it to roll to multiple lines in this space. And let's go ahead and launch that to see how it looks. Okay, so you can see there's the student label right there. This is the area where we can input text. And then our button is a little bit hidden there, and we have a label right there. So actually, let's revise this slightly. So we'll roll this up. Having a little trouble. Okay. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to change the title or the label for this button to be teach. And excuse me. Now, what we'll do first is we'll I'll show you how to connect the buttons. So we want to connect these buttons to the code so that when a user presses this button, it's going to interact with this custom code file here. So you can imagine, in a way, a dotted line between this nib zib user interface and this little icon right here, the file's owner, and then a further dotted line from this file's owner to these two files here. So this file right here is exactly this. This is the nib file, but there's a connection between the file's owner and these two guys, the .h, the .m. They're linked up in a way, and you can see this linkage by what's going on the app.delegate.m. So when the application launches, it starts up this window. And then there's a new view controller that's created. That's the view controller. That's this. So it's instantiating or allocating memory. It's allocating memory for this new view controller and then initializing it with a nib. And the nib is named view controller. So that's the connection there between this nib file and then this custom UI view controller object. See how it's inheriting from the UI view controller? That's the main object. That's the object that it inherits from, and this further inherits from other objects all the way down to NS object. So what we want to do is we want to connect this button to the code. And we need a method to be called when that button is touched by the user. And the method declaration goes here in the .h file. And this might be a bit confusing first, but when that button is pushed, that's considered an IB action. So it returns an IB action, or it actually returns void, but it's of type IB action, which is kind of a keyword that Xcode needs to understand what's going on with the nib and the code. We'll come back to that in a minute maybe, but for now, just know that IB action is associated with a button push in this case. And we'll call the method to be teach. And it's passing in here the sender information, but we'll just not worry about that. Oops. This is a declaration here in the .h, so we just leave it at that. And then we need to implement it in the .m file. So we can just put it in between the implementation and the @in tags, and put it down at the bottom there, bottom area. Closes off with the curly brace. And this is where we can put in some custom code. So teach. Okay. Let's do specific. Teach iPhone programming. Okay. And so we have a method implemented now that's going to do a nslog, printing to the console. But how do we link this button to that specific code? Because right now, you know, that method could be connected to lots of different things. How do we connect it to this button? And the way we do that is with connections. So we click on this button, and then we can see the connections inspector here on the right side. And you'll notice that these are some of the possible events that could be associated with this button. And the one we're interested in here is touch up inside, because that's what happens when the user presses that button. And the way I would, and right now there are no connection that's linked up to the button. So I want to link up this button with a connection. And in that process, that connection will be linked to the method in our view controller class. So let's do that by right-clicking. We can actually do that in a couple ways. In here, in this case, we'll do it by right-clicking on the button and then choosing Touch Up Inside and dragging it to the file's owner. And then the file's owner, Xcode searches in the header file, that .h file, for that keyword I was telling you about, the IB action. And at the time here, when you're trying to link up connections with buttons in the user interfaces, that's when it needs to know about that IB action. And it presents a set of options to the users, or to the developers like you. And it says, this button could be connected to the IB action teach. And then you can select it, and that links it up. And there you can see it now. It's linked up here. Touch up inside is linked to the teach method within the file's owner. And the file's owner is the view controller object. So you can imagine this dotted line between this class, view controller class. And then furthermore, we can also see in the connections inspector. So even if we didn't have this sort of right click, we can turn this back on by right clicking. We could also right click here and see connections associated with the text field. You see that there are none. There are no linkages. But then when we go back to the button, we see this linkage between the teach method, touch up inside, and this button. I'd also like to point out too that within the implementation file, you can also see that connection. So here in the gutter, you can see this connection, this button teach with this method, the teach method. So now let's run in our simulator, because what we're expecting is when we press that button, it'll print out nslog, teach iPhone programming. So I'll go ahead and run simulator. And here we have it. We have student label and then the text input field label that's you can't really see, and then teach. So this button, we're hoping it'll print out into the console our nslog statement, teach. And there it is. Teach iPhone programming. Now, we did it. This is, in a way, the kind of long and hard way to link up actions, IB actions, or button pressings to the code. There's an easier way that's called quick connections. So I'll be teaching you that in the next video.